Through the forest the beast had fled. Lyra could smell its blood and its fear. They were passing over familiar ground that just before the Cimmerian had followed. Past the clearing where the Wargrite had ambushed the Aesir, and then to the small alcove in the knoll that served as its den. The beast was laying against the wall. Its injuries had ceased bleeding, and some of the flesh had regrown. Yet the new growth looked pink and raw, as if the beast had lost something from the bite of the ancient metal. The sound of the water falling and the swaying of the trees belied the mortal contest that was about to occur. The Wargrite was on its feet as Lyra neared, but clearly still not ready to fight. Its breathing was labored and its stance drooped. Lyra was about to growl at it, but stopped himself. Then he spoke to it in Pictish. "I can't let you live. You will simply attack someone else if I do. I regret this." "Weak man," the thing spat. Then it charged Lyra. Using the spearhead, Lyra met its charge and stabbed again repeatedly into its body. One of the thrusts sank into the flesh of the creature where a man's lung might be. After that it was gasping, and its attacks became sloppy and slow. Finally it fell upon its back. Lyra jumped atop it, pausing momentarily to resist biting into the thing's neck, and instead repeatedly impaled it with his spearhead. Soon all that could once again be heard was the running of the tiny creek of water and the sorrowful swaying of the canopy. The thing lay broken beneath him, and Lyra felt the bear power recede. Beneath him the body of the Wargrite underwent a strange transformation. Fur began to fall from its flesh, and it shrunk in size. Muscle and sinew changed, and became something more human. The wicked claw-like nails fell from fingers that lost their bestial thickness. The jaw remained unchanged. It gurgled sounds that Lyra realized were words. They were Pictish words. Lyra knelt by the dying man. "Who are you?" he asked in Pictish. The man's eyes opened at the sound of his birth language. He said, "Thank you. Thank you, warrior. I am free of it. I am free of the sign." "What do you mean? Who are you?" Lyra asked. "I was Carjohar. I was a shaman of the Crow tribe long, long ago. I was supplanted by my student, Hochganuk. He is crafty, that one. Watch out for him. He arranged for one crisis after another to occur, and I in my folly thought I could use the sign of Jebel Sag without pause and not pay a price," said Carjohar. He coughed again and grasped Lyra's arm. "It can be tempting, so tempting, to be an animal rather than a man. They have no doubt, no fear, and no self-loathing. Take care, brother. Take care that you do not forget these things, or the mark can work its magic on you in manners that are not good." Carjohar coughed again, and then finished. "You must always use the mark and live your life in a good way. That is the only way to be safe from its power." Lyra was not sure what to say to comfort the man. He watched as the strange light surrounded the Pict, and when he glanced up, Lyra saw that the trio of phantom goddesses that haunted him had appeared. On their faces he read compassion for the dying man and concern for Lyra. "Help him!" he growled at them. It was the raven-haired one that shook her head slowly. Then she motioned to Carjohar's chest, where the liver resided. She finished the gesture with a cutting motion of her hand, and then a motion that implied burning. Lyra was about to berate the goddess when Carjohar squeezed his forearm. "Warrior, you must finish me. If you do not, the power of the mark will heal me, and I will be as I was before. I am a man, and I wish to meet my ancestors as a man rather than as a beast. Please, warrior, slay me." Lyra raised the spearhead high in the air and struck fast. The point pierced Carjohar's chest. The Pict looked up at the Cimmerian and sighed. Lyra closed Carjohar's eyes, and then he set to work removing the liver of the priest as he had been shown in his vision. It was not easy work, especially with only an improper tool at his use, but eventually the organ lay in his hand. The final stab of the spearhead into the heart, he let the spearhead remain there until the heart ceased to pulse. Lyra looked up from his task and witnessed the trio of phantom goddesses had surrounded him. He could not hear their voices, but they swayed and their mouths moved in song. They were singing Carjahar dirge. Lear found himself singing along with them in Pictish, though later he could not remember what it was he had sung, nor said. He returned to the camp exhausted and covered in gore. Sildar was aiding the Vanayar in binding wounds. Hulda was also bent on the task of aiding the wounded, though from a glance Lear could see that her sorrow was heavy on her. The dead women were close to her. She wishes she could cry, but she will complete her task before she allows herself to weep, Lear thought. He had his own task. He walked to the fire and threw the liver he had excised into it. A green and blue flame erupted from the cursed flesh, and it kindled with terrible speed. Lear sighed, relieved. The battle is over, he said. Then he heard Sildar swear and curse. Lear turned and saw Sildar was hemmed inside of a ring of women, and their spears. Cromstones, can't this night be done? Lear swore. Walking amongst the deceased, he spotted one of the phantom goddesses. She gazed at him with concern. I know, I'll handle it, because you and your sisters are so helpful, he muttered. He sensed the tension amongst the Vanayar, who even now traded silent looks. They would murder Sildar, yet the man had offered them their freedom if they fought, and fought they did. From what Lear could see, the Aesir had kept his word. Kill him, Hulda coldly uttered. The women, except for Jormungand, all advanced a step. Their faces contorted in distortions of rage and animalistic fury. Sildar had no doubt that after they stabbed him to death, they would eviscerate him and chop up his body. He could even fancy they would devour him in their rage. Caught between murder of a man who had fought with him or punishing the man who had enslaved Hulda and her kin, Lear was unsure what the just thing was to do. If he betrayed Sildar's aid in the battle and slew him, he would be an oath-breaker. Having slain the man he promised his service to. Yet if he let the man go unpunished, he would be permitting an insult to his wife. Both were against the customs of the Cimmerian tribal law. At first, he could not see an answer to the problem. Then his memory flickered back to a warning he had been given. You hold a staff in the middle, he whispered. Just kill him, and we can all go home to the land of my countrymen, Hulda cried. No, Lear snarled. He picked up a fallen shield, Ulf's he thought, and stood in front of Sildar. He is your enemy. He enslaved you, Hulda shouted in disbelief. I am not his slave. I am his bondsman. I swore to serve him in exchange for you and your kin being unmolested by him and his soldiers. If I slay him, or I allow you to slay him, I break my oath, Lear roared. Hulda was stunned. Though Lear had spoken of keeping his oath, she had assumed it was nothing more than necessary lies. They, the enslaved, were outnumbered, and she assumed that Lear was merely being practical or cowardly. The Vanir, being often foes of the Cimmerians, did not hold them or their traditions in high regard. Hulda was largely ignorant of Cimmerians, and now it shocked her to see that Lear did truly intend to keep his oath. She had assigned typical Vanir morality to Lear's actions, and had only seen the marriage ceremony as Lear being an opportunist. This was part of the reason she resented Lear, for she had convinced herself that he had wriggled a marriage from Sildar so he could continue to lay with her. Now she cast her mind backward along the trail, and the debt she owed Lear for her and her countrymen, no longer being subject to rapine. Guilt, unwelcome and unfamiliar to her, stabbed her soul. She had only learned one tool to deal with such unwelcome emotions. She shouted, You also swore an oath to me. Do you not care how I or my kin will be treated when we reach Asgard? Sildar may have sworn not to molest us, but no other Aesir has. They will surely risk it when they think you are negligent, or simply slay you so as to be free of the oath. What are you going to do about that? Lear sighed in resignation. In front of Sildar, Lear spoke. My wife and her kin I hereby order to return to their own land. For payment for my services, I demand you allow them the arms, armor, and equipment of the fallen. Sildar grimaced. He searched his knowledge of the customs of the north to find some way to refuse Lear's demand, yet the hardened Gothi could find none. I agree, Sildar replied, then slyly added, But if you wish them arms and armor for wages, then you must work for me still, for the expense of the arms and armor is greater than the service you have rendered so far. Very well, Lear returned. He was too exhausted to realize that he had been taken advantage of. Hulda was shocked. She had not expected the Aesir to agree, yet what else could he do? The bondsman was agreeing to his oath to his master. If Sildar disagreed, it would be an affront to the gods the man claimed to represent. She felt an urge to reach out and touch Lear, for he had just sold himself into bondage, again, for her and her kin. Yet she resisted, for she would not have him think of her as being weak and mercurial. With a scowl, Hulda exclaimed, "Well, if you two men are done bickering over us, as if we were cows at market, I'll see to the collection of the arms." Lear nodded. "Some man you are, always seeking someone to grovel before." Hulda slung the insult at Lear as she left. She heard Sildar laughing at Lear. "Ha ha ha! Quite a gentle wife you have there. Methinks she can tame you." As she was not facing them, Hulda did not see the silent, wolf-like glare that Lear gave Sildar that stilled any further insults from the Aesir. Nor did she notice him begin laying up a cairn of stones to mark the place, singing to the stones softly as he bent to his work of commemorating the dead. The morning sun did not shed bright light, but there was enough light to see and make one's way. The Vanayar went about their preparations to depart with lighter spirits. Well armed and provisioned, any daughter of the north could fend off a Kodiak bear or endure a blizzard. They sang a song of thanks to Frege and Freja, lesser gods of their homeland, and it rankled Hulda to hear the hymns. Frege and Freja were lovers. The intent of her kin was obvious. She would not have it. To be wed to a foreigner might be endurable, but to a Cimmerian hillbilly was intolerable. Yet now that feeling of powerlessness had begun to fade. She remembered how gentle Lear had been when they had been trapped in the cage. How even while possessed by a beast spirit, he had been a noble man. The guilt tugged at her gaze, and she found it strained where Lear was pounding a mixture in a pestle. Hulda felt compelled to say something to Lear, yet apologies were never something that came easy in the Vanayar tongue. Yet she owed Lear something in return for the trials that he had braved for her. She withdrew a knife and tugged at one of her braids. This she cut off, crossing the distance between them, but in shame and rage unable to look at him. She then handed the shorn braid to Lear. "For you to remember your wife, if you care to," she said. Accusation and insinuation of disloyalty and ingratitude were heavily laced in between her words. Lear paused in his medicinal work. He took the braid from her and tied it around his wrist to accompany that of Shiles Brand. His unearthly eyes promised her he would remember, though he dared not say it lest she become angry with him again. He presented her with a small stone he withdrew from his pouch. It was a black stone flecked with white. Upon it he had scratched a line of Oyam. "For you to remember your husband, if you care to," he returned. She recognized the stone as one she had seen him singing over in the night. Whatever witchery he had worked on it frightened her. Yet a wife cannot refuse a gift from her husband. This small infringement on her freedom rankled her. She snatched the stone from his palm. Hulda spun and returned to her kin. Lear was about to return to his work, a mixture to dull Sildar's pain, when he noticed another shadow moving towards him. He looked up and saw that Jormungand was approaching. She did not say anything, and in the last few strides she rushed forward suddenly and embraced the Cimmerian in a tight hug. Unsure of what to do, Lear awkwardly returned the embrace. "Stay alive, you black-maned hillbilly, hopelessly thick-headed, stubborn lout," Jormungand teased. "I will. It would be nice if I could do it dry," Lear teased back. Jormungand broke the embrace and looked away, purposely hiding her face. She declared with a sniff, "I'm not crying." "Of course. I'm not sad either," Lear lied. She smiled at him one last time and then left him to his toil. Another hour of preparation, the Vanayar formed into a line after Hulda came to their head. She gave out a cry and they began their long journey home. The women walked away from the cairn stones Lear had erected, and Hulda successfully fought herself to keep from looking back at the strange boy that had saved her and her countrywomen's lives. She even forced herself to sing along with the women and affect a happy mien. Watching them depart, Lear was struck with anxiety. First, he had grown up always fearing he would have been found wanting by women and refused, as he had been with Deirdre. Then he had found a kindred soul in Shyle, only to have her taken away by fate. Now his wife, was traveling away from him, her heart as cold as the ice that had given birth to her race. He looked to his wrist where Holda's braid now rested beside Shiles. He wasn't sure how to describe what he felt. Always, Lear whispered. Quite a shrew you have there. I think she could kill you if she were mad enough, Sildar teased Lear from behind. Yes, Lear replied, for he truly believed that Holda despised him. But she is right. Most men would have just killed me and not cared about keeping their oath. The gods be damned, Sildar probed. Cimmerians are better men than the ones you've known. We keep our sacred oaths, Lear said neutrally. You believe the gods take an interest in human deeds, then? Sildar asked. Lear watched the line of Aniar leaving. Beside him, the phantom goddesses hovered, watching him with an approval that had been lacking in their mane since he had murdered Branwen for revenge rather than justice. I know that they do. Damn them, Lear replied to Sildar. The night fell and Sildar slept by the fireside. Lear had wanted the Aesir to get as much sleep as possible, as he was sure that they would be visited that night, and he did not relish the thought of Sildar having knowledge of the hidden wives. The man was already obsessed with the lost secrets of the ancients' metallurgy. Lear did not want to imagine what he would do with one of the Asci. He watched the stars and practiced their names and patterns. His own learning overlapped now with the patterns he had seen beneath the earth, in the hall of Kalen and Mela. His first indication that he was not alone is when he noticed the shadow she cast beside him. He held out his hand, the one with the braids of hair about his wrist, and waited. Small fingers took his palm and turned it over. He felt her kiss the palm of his hand. Then she slid into the crook of his arm and looked up at the sky with him. Your people are of the moon and stars, and mine are of the sun and soil. Where shall the two of them ever make a home? Tiani asked him. On the tallest mountain, if they must, Lear answered. The she-woman glanced at Sildar, then said, His kind will simply chop the mountain down. Lear had no retort for the observation. She was correct. It was the nature of men such as Sildar to conquer, unless, of course, they were conquered and quelled first. He turned the problem over in his mind silently. The waif-like she toyed with the braids bound on Lear's wrist. She giggled and whispered in his ear, 2 brides for one of Kimmer's sons. Do you think your collection will stop here, or will there be more braids upon your wrist? I do not intend it, Lear hissed. Intentions mean nothing. Actions mean everything. So, what actions are you going to take, Kimmerson? The she asked. I'm going to escort this bastard, Lear said, pointing to Sildar, back to his home, fulfill my service, and then, I hope, I can go west into Vanaheim. I'll find Holda and see if there's any way to get her released from the marriage bond so that she'll be happy. Tiani pouted. She whispered, You could remain here and play with me until Shyle awakens. No, I need to find a way to wait for Shyle to heal. She said it would be many decades. I had made an oath to be there when she awakened. There must be some way, some spell or potion that can aid me. Even if I'm a dotard, I will be there, waiting for her, Lear said. Tiani sighed. I believe you. You'll forget me. I'll be all alone again. Lear looked down at Tiani's face. She was trying not to cry. He said, I could sing to you of Shile's tree, and then you would know how to find her. Then you would not be alone, at least not in the long term. Tiani's expression changed. She smiled slowly. Aloud she said, Yes, please, Kimmerson, sing into me Shile's song. Lear closed his eyes and let the song, with all of its heartache, churn inside of him. He copied the chords with his voice and impressed them into Tiani's being. When the song was finished, the diminutive Asci was clenched to him tightly, overwhelmed by his knowing and his longing. She gave out little sobs at the end of her solitude, and what was to be their parting. When she recovered, Tiani whispered, I will go to Shyle, and I will sing to her of the bravery of her one. Do not let these Northmen turn you into one of them. Glory is an addictive drug. Do not seek it out. Come back to us when you've found your way and have settled all your troubles. I will, Lear vowed. Then Tiani kissed his cheek and spun on her heel. She fled for the trees, sure that if she did not reach them, she would remain by his side and adventure with him, though she would wither. For his own part, Lear returned to watching the night sky. He had heard that the truly wise could foresee events before they unfolded by interpreting the motions of the stars. He wished he were one that was so wise. The next morning, Sildar needed aid with all of his tasks. Lear spent the morning helping his new master bathe, answer nature, dress, and prepare his gear. Another Cimmerian would have felt demeaned by such labor, but it was a little different with how Lear had been treated by the Picts while he had been their captive, or by his mother while she had been his charge. If Sildar noticed this, he said nothing, and also did not indicate any gratitude. And gratitude from those he served was something Lear was familiar with. The two men shouldered their gear, with Lear carrying a double portion of the weight. What gear the Vanayar had left behind, he now carried on top of his pack frame. The tent, nearly 50 pounds, camp spades, pots, water skins, hatchets, and saw, plus other survival gear was all piled on top of him. Somewhere along the trail, Sildar jested. You Cimmerians make fine mules. Only because it's Sierra laggards and break so easily, Lear snarled back. The trek north was fraught with snowdrifts and a storm, howling down at them from the highlands of Cimmeria and the Pictish forest. It threatened to envelop them. It was as if the land itself was unwilling to let Lear depart. If his wife had no love for him, the wilderness would marry him. Sildar and Lear tested the ground with their ends of their spears as they walked. There was deep snow lying ahead of them that could conceal fissures in the stone beneath them. They would make their way forward slowly and carefully, learning to trust each other with their lives as they traveled. It would be a long journey.